Long-standing issues between Singapore and Indonesia are closer to being resolved. A number of accords have been signed by Singapore Prime Minister Loong and Indonesian President Joko Widodo. They cover defence cooperation, airspace management and extradition. We have coverage tonight from Jeremy Koh and Saiful Bahri Ismail. First to you, Jeremy. Jeremy, this is the first retreat between these two leaders in 3 years.
Yes, indeed. Now, this retreat is a long-held tradition in which leaders as well as ministers from both sides meet informally each year to discuss issues as well as ways to strengthen ties. And it's typically held annually, as I just mentioned, but the pandemic disrupted plans. Now, even though both leaders, President Joko Widodo as well as Prime Minister Hsien met regularly, most recently at the G20 summit in Rome last October, PM Lee said it's still important to resume the leaders' retreat. Because he says it's a key platform to discuss and make progress on the bilateral agenda. And Mr. Lee says bilateral relations have taken a major step forward today. He says he's very happy that President Widodo and himself has just witnessed the signing of a balanced set of agreements that addresses three outstanding bilateral issues between Singapore and Indonesia. The Flight Information Region, or FIR, and the defense cooperation and the extradition of fugitives. Now, under the FIR agreement, Singapore and Indonesia have agreed to realign the boundary between the Jakarta FIR and the Singapore FIR. Now, over the years, Indonesia had repeatedly expressed its wish to take over the FIR over the Riau Islands, which Bintan is part of. Now, this FIR has been managed by Singapore since 1946 as mandated by the International Civil Aviation Organization. But on its part, Singapore has repeatedly stated that the FIR is not an issue of sovereignty, but of the safety and efficiency of commercial air traffic. Now, going forward, Indonesia will delegate to Singapore the provision of air navigation services in portions of the airspace within the realigned Jakarta FIR. And this agreement will remain in force for at least 25 years. Now, speaking earlier, Indonesian President Joko Widodo said the area of the FIR will encompass the entire Indonesia's territorial airspace, especially in the areas around the Riau Islands and the Natuna Island. And moving forward, he says he hopes that the law enforcement cooperation in aviation, safety, and defense security of both countries can be strengthened on the principle of mutual benefits.
On the issue of the agreements with the FIR, Jeremy, Indonesia has been asking to take over control of this above Riau Island. Tell us why it's so important to the two countries.
Now, Indonesia has repeatedly said over the years that it wants to take over the control of the FIR over the Riau Islands, where Bintan is part of, which is where I am right now. And this area, as I mentioned, has been managed by Singapore since 1946 as part of a mandate under the International Civil Aviation Organization. So it's really a thorny issue between both sides and one that's settled today. And both sides are very happy to put this behind them and to move on.
Jeremy Koh in Bintan.
Now, for reaction from Indonesia, Saiful Bahri Ismail joins us live. Saiful, have these new agreements struck a chord with the public?
Well, there have been positive reactions in Indonesia following the signing of the agreements during the leaders' retreat today, especially on the extradition of a fugitives treaty. Indonesia's Law and Human Rights Minister Yasona Lawli, who signed the extradition agreement, said this would ensure criminals cannot hide in Singapore. To put things into perspective, this extradition treaty is actually not new. It was signed by Singapore and Indonesia in 2007, but has not been ratified yet by Indonesia. What is new about it is that the agreement is now retroactive to 18 years from 15 years previously. The change is in accordance with laws in Indonesia. Mr. Yasona also said both countries agreed that the citizenship of the fugitive be determined at the time the crime was committed. This is to prevent the possibility that the fugitive may change his citizenship to the country he is currently in to escape from the law. Mr. Yasona believes that the extradition treaty will create a deterrence effect for criminals in Singapore and Indonesia. There are 31 types of crimes listed under the extradition treaty. They include corruption, money laundering, narcotics, terrorism, and terrorism financing. Lawmakers have urged the government to immediately hunt down fugitives charged for corruption in Singapore. Indonesia's Corruption Eradication Commission also welcomed the extradition treaty. The commission said the treaty is progressive and can accelerate eradication of corruption in the country. In addition, it may help in recovering assets hidden by fugitives.
Saiful, you're just talking about one of the agreements, that's the extradition treaty. Of course, there are two others, the FIR as well as the Defence Cooperation Agreement. All these need to be ratified. Do you see them getting smooth passage in the Indonesian parliament?
Now, even though these agreements have been described as an important milestone in Singapore and Indonesian relations, it is crucial that they be ratified in Parliament. If not, they will just remain as agreements and cannot be implemented. Lawmakers are expected to scrutinize the agreements very carefully, especially on the Flight Information Region Agreement, because it is a new agreement. A lot of its details need to be looked at to see if they bring benefits to Indonesia. This is where hurdles could come in. For example, the Extradition Treaty and Defence Cooperation Agreement was signed in 2007, but both agreements have not been implemented because they have not been ratified by the Indonesian Parliament. In 2007, former President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono could not get lawmakers to ratify the agreements. Lawmakers refused to endorse the Defence Cooperation Agreement because it has a provision regarding Singapore's right to conduct military exercises in Indonesian waters. Fast forward 15 years, Indonesia has Joko Widodo as the president, who has consolidated his power in his second and final term in office. In August last year, Mr. Widodo expanded his coalition by pulling in another political party, the National Mandate Party, to claim now a whopping 82% majority of the 575 seats at the House of Representatives. We have seen a number of controversial bills being rushed and passed in Parliament. One example is the Job Creation Law, and more recently, Parliament passed a bill on the state's new capital, providing a legal framework for Indonesia's capital to be moved from Jakarta to East Kalimantan. With Mr. Widodo's control and influence in Parliament now, perhaps there is a better chance of the agreements getting ratified.
Thanks for all that. Saiful Bara Ismail in Bintan.